In the heart of medieval Europe, justice wasn't blind. It watched with unyielding eyes, judged with divine certainty, and demanded absolute obedience. Welcome to a time where fear and faith were allies, their grip shaping empires and silencing dissent. But here's a question to ponder. How far would a society go to preserve its idea of order? The 14th century was an age of paradoxes. On one hand, brimming with magnificent cathedrals and illuminated manuscripts, and on the other, governed by shadows of superstition and unimaginable fear. This was a world nestled between soaring ideals of morality and the unyielding codes of harsh reality, where allegory and punishment intertwined. Let us set the stage. Picture a bustling medieval square, cobblestones worn smooth by the footsteps of vendors, knights, and peasants alike. But this square, today, isn't a place of commerce. A scaffold dominates the center. Spectators gather and whisper stories of warning to their children. "Stay faithful," they murmur, "lest you tempt the wheel of justice." Medieval justice systems reflected not only laws, but the very soul of a society, a blend of ritual and spectacle. Kings, queens, clergymen, and inquisitors upheld justice, yet the true enforcers were unseen forces, belief and fear. Religion, deeply embedded in daily life, didn't just offer solace, it dictated behavior. To act against the crown could mean acting against God, and to act against God was to risk eternal damnation. But how did such a gripping system evolve? Let's peel back the layers. In medieval times, crime was seen as more than simply breaking human law. It was a moral transgression disrupting divine order itself. Every theft, every heresy, every rebellion was not just a challenge to authority, but a crack in the harmonious design of the cosmos. Such acts couldn't be overlooked. They had to be purged, marked with penance and punishment that both restored balance and reminded onlookers of their place. Take, for example, the practice of trial by ordeal, one of the most harrowing expressions of medieval justice. Imagine this. A person accused of a crime is handed a heated iron rod. They must walk several paces while clutching it, bare hands against blistering metal. Their burns are bandaged, and after a set number of days, often 3 or 5, priests would inspect the wounds. If they showed signs of healing, it was deemed a divine sign of innocence. If infected, the accused faced a grim fate. It sounds cruel, but to medieval minds, divine judgment was a comfort. They believed God's will was an absolute measure of truth, beyond the flaws of human reasoning. Now, imagine the potency of that belief. Picture a village witness to such a ritual, a community conditioned to trust the Almighty more than any court or jury. The air would be thick with whispers, prayers, and the shared anxiety of what the divine hand would reveal. To us, these customs seem far removed, but for them, they were an anchor in an unpredictable and tumultuous world. Why, you may wonder, did the medieval populace accept such methods unquestioningly? The answer lies in faith, structured class systems, and, most notably, fear. Consider the concept of public punishment. While the physical act of administering sentences was undeniably brutal at times, the broader intention went beyond mere retribution. Public executions, stockades, and mutilations served as stark reminders. Disobey, and you risk not just pain, but humiliation. The public spectacle made an example of the offender, delivering cautionary tales straight into the collective imagination. One powerful symbol of medieval justice was the infamous breaking wheel, or Catherine wheel. Contrary to common assumptions, its name doesn't merely stem from St. Catherine. It's a misinterpretation tied to mythos rather than her actual story. But the wheel, nonetheless, held a grim mystique. This wasn't merely an instrument of execution. It became a theater of authority. Placed prominently in town centers, it wasn't about hidden punishment, but carving lessons into memory. The very presence of a wheel in a community signified that rulership was vigilant and dissent unthinkable. Another chilling practice came in the form of the masked executioner. Often misunderstood in popular depictions, these cloaked figures did not symbolize heartlessness, but rather the detachment of personal vendetta. Justice, medieval rulers argued, stood apart from individual emotions. By separating faces from their purpose, executioners embodied an institution rather than personhood. This facelessness mirrored a deity-like impartiality, a grim irony, considering the personal suffering their craft caused. And what role did the church play in this delicate dance between power and pain? Religion wasn't merely a backdrop to medieval justice, it was a central scriptwriter. Inquisition courts sought heretics with fervor, investigating accusations of witchcraft, blasphemy, and apostasy. Unlike common perceptions, inquisitions didn't immediately leap to torturous conclusions. Many trials began with testimony, an opportunity for self-incrimination under incredible pressure. Yet, the essence lay in how the church framed disobedience, not as mere criminality, but as a direct defiance against divine harmony. Chroniclers of the day leave us haunting glimpses into such cases. Consider a 14th-century scribe's account of heretical trials. Prisoners chained within dark stone confines, the distant murmurs of prayer halls above them. These depictions were as much cautionary tales as historic records, echoing through both sermons and fireside storytelling. By portraying divine justice in their writings, authorities amplified the moral narrative, emphasizing the stakes of challenging cosmic design. And remember, the unity of church and state magnified this atmosphere. Monarchs relied on religion to enforce their claims on power. By intertwining spiritual obedience with earthly loyalty, they created a world where rebellion had no neutral ground. To rise against the king wasn't merely treason, it was blasphemy. This coupling secured their thrones but also rooted justice in collective fear. Thus, every courtroom and every scaffold became a sacred battlefield. But let's consider the psychology of fear. Fear is one of humanity's most primal instincts, deeply tied to survival. The rulers of the medieval world, consciously or instinctually, harnessed fear in its myriad forms: fear of supernatural wrath, communal shame, and the physical punishments themselves. It's easy to see parallels today when fear manipulates societies, whether through media, politics, or networks of power. Public punishments and divine ordeals emphasized collective participation. These weren't simply passive spectacles, but rituals in which a whole village or town certified their allegiance to order. Imagine the communal reverence as a bell tolls over the announcement of a trial, the silent assembly watching as judgment unfolds. The lesson wasn't just for the convicted, it was a reminder to all. And yet, history continually reminds us of resistance. Beneath the heavy enforcement of justice lay flickers of dissent. Underground heretical movements like the Waldensians whispered of alternative theologies, often facing tragic ends. Peasant revolts occasionally erupted, challenging landowners and officials, testing the boundaries of medieval unity. These rebellions, though often short-lived, left seeds of change that would germinate in later centuries. Today, we find it easy to judge those who lived in this era, to view medieval justice as barbaric and their beliefs as archaic. However, it's essential to reflect on the times they inhabited. Living besieged by wars, famine, and disease, their belief systems provided both reassurance and control. To understand them, we must understand the fabric of their world. A delicate balance of survival and submission to unassailable powers. In the end, every age believes itself kinder and more advanced than the last. We like to think we've outgrown the tools of fear that once held societies together. But as history whispers solemnly in our ears, it reminds us of an uncomfortable truth. The line between order and horror is thinner than we often dare to admit. So, as we pull back from the shadows of the medieval scaffold and the ringing chorus of divine justice, we leave with this lingering thought. When justice dances with fear and faith, it reveals as much about a society's aspirations as it does its flaws. And while we've left far behind the wheels, ora et labora, and sacrificial rituals, The echoes of that time remind us that, in the complexity of human society, fear remains one of our oldest tools of control.